Hello again, it's Grandpa Joe, and this is another video in talking about my early life and a lot of the abuse that I suffered. In this video, I'm going to not talk so much about me. Um, I'm going to give you information about my father and the limits of his depravity, so you can get a real clear picture of who he was, his mindset, and have a better idea of exactly what myself and my mother and siblings dealt with on a regular basis. And it wasn't just our family. His treachery and depravity was far reaching, and even on a global scale. So let me talk about that. So, from talking with my aunts and uncles, his brothers and sisters, he was a jerk from pretty much the beginning. He was this kind of person that would would get in an argument with his sister or something like that, and then he would pretend to get hurt. He would like slap himself on the face and then run to his mother and say that his sister had hit him or whatever, and he would cry, fake crocodile tears, they did this thing to me, they hurt me, they did this, right? So he was constantly doing that to his siblings. Um, when he got older and met my mother, he was young and thin and good looking and very charismatic. Okay, he's always been very good at deceiving people into making them believe that he's this great person. He's a nice person. He's wonderful. He's all that in a bag of chips. And he was intelligent. As far as that goes, he had partial photographic memory that he would use for nefarious reasons, basically cheating at cards. He could stack a deck and deal out, whatever hand he wanted to whoever, right? And not using marked cards, just regular cards. He would basically watch them as he was shuffling them and put the cards, in the right place. He was that good. So he wasn't stupid. And that's important because this wasn't, evil from a standpoint that he was just kind of dumb and clumsy and, you know, um, uh, and he would just do these things because he just didn't know better. You know what I mean? Um, this was intentional. All the things he did with intent. Now, as I said, shortly after was married to my mom, first of all, he ran off with her. He convinced her to go with him to another state and get married. And when he got married to my mother, he told her after the marriage, "You belong to me now. You are going to do what I tell you. I'm the man of the house, and you're going to do what I want, when I want, how I want." Kind of a deal, setting her straight. You belong to me now. You're basically my servant. So she should have done something about it then. But again, charismatic. Like my mom's mother loved him, thought he was the greatest thing in the world because he was a convincing liar. Okay. Now, he was always like super sexually promiscuous and homosexual, okay, or bisexual, right? Non-discriminate. Who he screwed didn't matter. So he told us a story, or that he was raped when he was 16 years old, that he worked at the sawmill, and that the owner there and the guys that worked there jumped on him, tied him up, and the owner raped him, right? Now, he didn't tell us that. He told my mom to tell us that, right? So he didn't tell us himself, but that was the story, that he was assaulted and raped by this guy, right? Because he wanted us to feel sorry for him, I guess. But during his childhood, he had a best friend, and his brother, his younger brother, from his standpoint, from what he observed, was that he was having sex with his childhood friend, this other boy, right? From the time he was, 11, 12 years old, he was having sex with this other boy. Then, as he got older in college, in high school, late grade school, middle school is what we'd call it. He was going around and having sex with girls, and in many cases, like sexually assaulting them, not giving them a choice. So that's the kind of, person he was. He was very, very promiscuous and into a lot of sick, twisted stuff. Okay? And of course, my mother didn't know anything about this. And he actually sexually assaulted and had sex with her younger sister. And because her sister told her about this, I already had your husband already slept with me, right? And so from early on, he had no respect for my mother. Of course, having sex with her younger sister after they were married, so right out of the gate, he's not being faithful. And while they were married, he would go meet with this guy who raped him, and come back with a bleeding anus, and not say anything about it. Oh, nothing happened. And it's pretty obvious what was going on. But so anyway, he was an alcoholic early on, and so he was drunk all the time. So my mom, I'm not sure if she had a separate job or if she was just working still with her father on the farm. But my dad was in and out of jobs because he was drunk all the time. So he wasn't taking very good care of us, and so Mom didn't have a lot to eat, and she'd have to go to her family's house to eat so that we could have, food, because she was, we were just babies. And, so he wasn't a very good provider either. And then they went to church, and he said he got saved. And he told my mom, he said, I got saved. He says, things are going to change. Things are going to be different. He says, you're going to see. I'm going to prove it to you that, things are going to be better, and I'm going to be, completely change, right? I was like, okay. Well, I had talked before about him modeling himself after this guy named who was a, local TV preacher celebrity type, and what kind of person he was. And my dad wanted to be just like him, right? And so he became a preacher at our church, and there were several preachers at our church, and nothing wrong with the church. The church was good, but he was just he was very, like I said, very charismatic and intelligent and persuasive. And he convinced these people that all his intentions were good, and that he loved everybody, and he was just the greatest person in the world, and that he loved his family, and he treated them with dignity and grace and all this crap. Well, nothing could be farther from the truth. He would go and engage in sex parties, orgies, as a preacher. Okay, he would take other church members and kind of lead them astray, and convince them to cheat on their wives. Oh, you like so and so? Well, you should go talk to her. You could probably sleep with her. You know, and I'll go with you. I'll help you. I'll be your wingman. So you can get in bed with this woman, right? And then he would convince them to sleep with these people, and then he would use that as kind of a blackmail, and he would then expose himself in his own dirty little secrets, with them, and take them to orgies and sex shows and things like that. But they couldn't tell on him because he would tell on them, right? So I already convinced you to do something wrong. Now I have dirt on you. Now it's okay if you know my dirty stuff because you're not going to tell anybody, right? And it was early on. We were still living in Indiana, so I was, maybe 5, 6, 7 years old, okay, in this time period. He was actually having sex with the pastor's daughter, younger daughter, like minor, like 12 years old, kind of thing, right? So he was having sex with her, and he was also molesting a couple of the little girls in our church. So he started his own business, right? The construction business. And he would go around to other church members that had these little girls. And, at church, he would be like, oh, she's such a beautiful girl. Oh, I love her so much. Oh, hug her and squeeze her and, all this kind of stuff, and like she's really concerned and caring and, loving and all this kind of stuff, right? And then he would say, oh, hey, why don't you let me take your little girl, your little 5, 6-year-old or 4-year-old daughter, and let me take her with me and to drive around. I gotta go some places and do some work or whatever, and let me take your daughter with me. And they would, because they trusted him. And so I'm sure he was molesting these little girls. And the reason why I'm sure of that was because he was definitely molesting little girls later on. So, and then, so he doing all this and cheating on my mother. Like I think I said before that one of the women in church, this person named, he actually had twins with her while she was married. So both of them are married. They're screwing around. He gets her pregnant, right? And she has twins. Well, her husband knows that that's not his kids, right? I'm guessing that she told him that. And so he started a paternity suit against my father. Basically, hey, you're responsible for these children and you're going to pay. Okay? So suddenly, my dad had this great burden for people in Florida. And so we left Indiana due to this scandal where he was having children with another member of our church. Okay? And that's why we left Indiana. It wasn't because God had called him to help some small church out. It's that he got this woman pregnant and now he had to leave, right? Because he's going to court. And so he fled the state to avoid that paternity suit and the embarrassment that came along with it. And of course, he convinced everybody in church that no, he didn't have anything to do with her, And my mother knew that he was running around with this woman and went to the pastor and said, hey, he's cheated on me with this woman. And the pastor was so convinced that Mike was this great, wonderful man of God, preacher, that he told my mom, no, you're just being jealous, because he went and talked to my dad, and my dad said, no, I'm not doing anything. It's like she just jealous, these women pay a lot of attention to me, but I'm not interested in any of them. I'm a married man, I'm faithful to my wife, but I'm a preacher, and people want to come and talk to me about the message and stuff, and so she sees that interest and thinks that it's sexual in nature, but it's not. She's just being jealous. And so the pastor talked to my mom and told her that, to stop talking about this, that, it's just jealousy, that he's talked to him and he's not doing any of this. It's none of this is true. And, if you keep bringing this stuff up, you're going to hurt his ministry, right? His mission for God, So don't talk about this because you're going to destroy his, reputation. Well, he destroyed it himself with the paternity suit. So here we go down to Florida. So continued the same thing there. So he became a pastor of a church, right? And there was a single mother there that had twins. Strange coincidence. And so he started messing around with her. Now, she wasn't really a very attractive woman, and she was not altogether there, let's just say. And it's my belief that he was messing around with her to get to her 2 twin daughters. And it wasn't long before there were, verifiable rumors, basically, that he was molesting those 2 little girls. And she actually accused him of that. That, this man is molesting my children. Well, he claimed that, she was in love with him, that she had been pursuing him and trying to get him to sleep with her, and that he was rejecting her, and this was just her way of getting back at him. I'm going to destroy your reputation. You won't be with me, so I'm going to destroy your reputation in the church. Well, what do you know? We had to move again. So he left the church, and we didn't associate with those people at that church anymore, right? So we didn't really technically. We moved out of the parsonage that they had and into another house, but we moved away from those people. So now he's by himself, and we're actually having church in our house. So some of the people that were going to that church came over to listen to my dad preach out of our house. And basically I would set up folding chairs in our kitchen area, and we'd have people come over, and he would, give a Sunday morning service there. So, anyway, I guess some others, he got involved with some other people, women, whatever. And we eventually moved away to North Carolina. So he basically embarrassed himself again somehow, because there was no other reason for this. His business was actually doing really well. Finally, when we first moved from Indiana, let me start back up to Indiana. He quit his job at Chrysler to form his own business, and we moved out of a nice brand new house into this old piece of crap farmhouse. This is a continuing story. So we move into this, old 100-year-old, mildew, musty farmhouse with wood stoves in it. So we didn't even have good heat. And he bought a backhoe and some other equipment to start his own business, which he basically ran around molesting little girls and having sex with other women and men too. That friend of his, he would keep going back to him on a regular basis. The man who supposedly raped him, he would just, for some reason, kept going back to him and meeting with him on occasions. And that guy, my mother talked to this man that supposedly had raped her husband, and he told her that he was in love with him, and that he had never raped or pushed himself on him, that this was a mutual thing, right? So, of course, that's very believable considering, his lifestyle. So, anyway, so my mom is supporting us. He's just starting his business, so he's not making any money. Well, he got into business of making these storm shelters. There's a tornado alley there in Indiana. So he got into business of converting these septic tanks into storm shelters. So with a few minor modifications, he could have a pretty decent storm shelter with ventilation and everything. And so he was putting these storm shelters in place and selling them. He actually had a local radio station that would put his commercial on after every single tornado warning. So whenever there was a tornado warning, the guy would come on and say, "Hey, you want to protect yourself? Call Mike's Excavating to have a storm shelter put in. Blah 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 blah. Call this number." Right? All of a sudden, business exploded. He was making money hand over fist. He was actually hiring subcontractors to do a lot of the work because he couldn't keep up with it. It was just so much work, and he just money coming in hand over fist. And then it was during this time that the paternity suit came up and we had to leave. So we had to left all that money behind to and made my mother quit her job at Chrysler, or not Chrysler, Delco, which is GMC. So she had a really good job, was making good money and being promoted and doing well, and so left all that, took off to Florida to live in this 2-bedroom. And by the way, we have 3 kids in our family. Live in this super small, flat roof, 2-bedroom house in Englewood, Florida. Okay, so nobody knows us at all. I mean, we don't have any family, any friends of any kind. We didn't know anybody from Englewood. Okay, now my grandparents were in Tampa, Florida, but we didn't know anybody in Tampa or Englewood other than my grandparents. So he's drums up some business, and it was lean times. I mean, it was very difficult. We had people that would bring us food because we were in abject poverty. Okay, and he wouldn't let my mother go to work because he was jealous. He was afraid that he would run off with somebody, right? Like he was, he knew that he was in bad shape financially and didn't want my mom running off with some other person. So she wasn't allowed to work. She worked with him. So, he kept her close to him, working with what jobs he could find, so that, she wasn't allowed to work and have or make any money. He wanted to, completely control her. So years later, his business grew enough that he was starting to make a lot of money, and he was actually turning down contracts for hundreds of thousands of dollars because he was making too much money doing other things, right? So again, more business than he could handle. And then we took off, sold all the equipment. We had a John Deere front end loader. We had a Case backhoe. We had a dump truck. We had a Bobcat. We had a bunch of other smaller equipment, right? Sold it all, and we took off to move to North Carolina, to a state and place that we knew nobody whatsoever. We didn't know anybody up there, or anybody who had ever lived there. So we moved to Murphy, North Carolina, and this time in a pretty decent house because we had money from selling all the equipment, and we're basically living off the equipment while my sister is going to college, right? So she's in college and I'm in high school still. And she gets her GED. So she gets out of high school early and goes into college. And she gets her degree and starts teaching. And so she is now providing for our family. And he never was successful up there. So we were in North Carolina for like 6 months, living off the money from selling the equipment, and then we moved to Georgia. Um, Again with this church, so he pastored into the church. So we moved out of the decent house we were living in and moved to the worst house we've ever lived in, which was this log cabin that had been boarded up and had siding over. But I mean, you could basically see light through the walls in a lot of places. It was just no insulation, shoddy construction. It was disgusting. And when we first moved in there, there was a chicken farm nearby. So these two great big chicken houses full of tens of thousands of chickens. And it was the first cold snap. And so all the flies and wasps and everything that were over there in that chicken house, I guess they closed them down. All of them came to our house because we had a wood stove that we were burning. This was the first day that we were there in this house. Okay, and I'm talking, it was, unbelievable the amount of flies. They had blackened the whole side of the house and the roof on the side of the house that had the fireplace, right, or the wood stove, completely black. And there were flies and wasps and hornets coming in from every hole in the wall. The dish with the living room light, we had to take it down and empty it like 2 or 3 times because it was full of insects, bees and flies and wasps and hornets. It was ridiculous. And anyway, terrible, right? Well, I said all that to get to the point where he's going to do a mission to Haiti. So we're in this church, and suddenly, out of nowhere, he decides that he wants to do this mission and go to Haiti, and we're going to start providing mission dollars to this Haitian guy. Well, something I forgot to mention is that my father was a horrible racist. Okay? He was a member of the Ku Klux Klan. We know that he shot and hit this one black man that happened to be walking near our property. It wasn't even his house. It was my grandfather's house. And he was on the property, and my dad went out and shot him with a shotgun. And the guy took off, but we don't know if he was mortally wounded or not. But there was another instance where my dad went and, with another man, another KKK member, he was a member of the KKK. The KKK was real big in Indiana. So while he was in Indiana, he killed another black man. So with this other guy, they ran him out of town. And that was just the ones we knew of. So, I mean, horrible racist. And even as a preacher, he was a racist. So, again, when we were in Florida, in Inglewood, like I said, he was in construction and did a lot of planting of palm trees, full-size palm trees. At this particular period, right? He was working with this other guy, and they were just planting full-size palm trees just everywhere, because there was a whole lot of growth at that time, and people wanted to have full-size trees in these new constructions to make it look like it'd been there forever, right? A lot of work with trees. And so he hired 2 black men to help dig these, trees out and plant them, whatever, right? And he called them the N-word right to their face. Hey, N-word, go get that. Hey, N-word, go do this. N-word, N-word, N-word. And this is where he's a pastor of a church at this time. Okay? And he's referring to these men as N-word right to their face in front of anybody that was there, right? And this was in the late 70s, early 80s when this was going on. And he would when they would come to the house to get paid or whatever, he would make them go around to the back door. They weren't allowed to come to the front door. And he told them this, I don't let inwards come through my front door. You have to come around to the back, right? So he'd make them come around the back to get their paycheck. And just calling them inward, So that's who he was. He hated black people. And then we're in Georgia, and suddenly he's got this great desire to go help out Haiti, which is all black people. Okay? And so I was like, wow, maybe Dad's changed, because he's, pretty well racist. And we moved to Georgia, into this county that was all white. There were no black people in that entire county. That's why he wanted to move there, away from North Carolina, because Murphy, North Carolina, where we lived, had a black population. He wanted to move to Union County, Georgia, where there were no black people at all. That was we moved into this crappy house just so he could get away from black folks, I think. So anyway, I got this desire to go to Haiti and help them out. So we raised money for him to go to Haiti. And he went over there and he brought back all these pictures of all these these Haitian preachers and stuff like that. Well, what I didn't realize at the time, but found out later on, was that Haiti was next to the Dominican Republic. And at that time in history, the Dominican Republic was known for child prostitution. And so what my father did is he went over to Haiti, and when he got there, he went around everywhere he could taking pictures of everything, of these different black people, and then took off and went to the Dominican Republic and had a little sex vacation with, minor girls. Okay? That was his intention. And then, and that's kind of stuff just, it seemed like he was trying to help people, but in every case, it was the opposite. He was trying to use or abuse people. And anybody that he, told that he was going to help them, he ended up destroying their lives. There's another gentleman, he's dead now, his name was, and, he did the same thing as he did with his preacher friends in Indiana. He would convince them to kind of do something that they shouldn't do, right? Like he convinced this guy to have sex with this woman, and then videotaped him, and then used that against him to, give him money, or I don't know what all he did to that guy, but he destroyed his life. Ruined this man's life. First of all, convinced him to come down here to Florida. He was going to help, be a truck driver and make lots of money. We weren't making lots of money. But he convinced this other guy to come down and, we're going to make lots of money, yada, 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 and then got him to sleep with this woman, videotaped it, told the woman, this is all planned, right? Videotaped him and then used that to blackmail him. And I don't know exactly what all he blackmailed him or got from the guy, but took everything he had and ruined his life, destroyed his family, and just horrible stuff. And then so eventually he when he had a trucking business. So when we finally left Georgia. I'm guessing because he was having sex with one of the members in the church. I found out that was true. So there was a woman in the church that he was messing around with. And he was also trying to elicit sex from some of the younger girls that were in the church. And so, of course, we had to leave Georgia and we went back to Florida. And so he started a trucking business there in Florida. We lived in Plant City. And he started a trucking business. Well, he eventually got to the point where he had 4 different trucks, and he hired as many women as he could. So We had one guy working for us, and the rest of them were women, which of course he would go out and have sex with, right? Um, so that was the whole plan. So he's got these women that he's screwing. And one of them was a young 20-something-year-old woman who was basically looked like a lesbian. She was like, had big muscles. She was kind of short and squatty with, she lifted weights, and she had a real short, butch haircut and tattooed all up. And he came home one day and told my mom, said, listen, said, me and Diana, I'm going to get a trailer, and me and Diana are going to stay in Ocala during the work week so we can work, and then I'm going to come back on the weekends. And in other words, she's going to live with this woman. And my mom's like, no. He said, if you're going to go with her to Ocala, then just go with her to Ocala. I don't want you back. This is it. We're done. Right? So finally, things had changed enough to where my mom had the courage, and without feeling that, that he was so entangled with this woman that she knew that he would rather just go off with this woman, right? So that's what happened, and he just took off with this woman, and they ended up, getting married, and of course he abused her, and destroyed her life and her life of her parents. So now he's out of our life, so to speak. So he ends up marrying this other woman who he abused, and she got rid of him, but not before they had 2 children. And of course, he abused, the oldest of those 2 girls was his target. So he abused that one girl specifically, and the other girl he treated nice, because she was, a very beautiful young woman. And I know what his plans were with her because he did the same thing with my sister. Okay? And we found that out while we were in Georgia, that he had started molesting my sister and threatened to kill her. Okay? I'll tell that story. So he was doing these horrible things to her, and this was when she was in college. This is how much control he had over us. So this is an adult woman that was in college, and he was taking her to school, and he's told her, he says, he said, I could just take you into the woods here and bury you, and no one would ever find your body, and it would be like you just disappeared from school and, just disappeared, and nobody would know the better. So if anybody found out, if you told anybody what I was doing, that's what's going to happen. You're going to end up in the woods up here. And I said, if you tell your mom or anybody else, they're going to end up in here with you. Okay? So that's, that was him. So that kind of horrible person is who he was. And then, I know this is going long, but so he was at least out of our lives, right? And he would every now and then call my mom to basically torment her. She didn't want to talk to him, but he would call her up and basically torment her. And she would ask him, it's like, don't you feel guilty or, about the things you did? You never apologized or never asked people to forgive you, for what you did. You've never admitted the things that you've done. And he says, doesn't that make you feel guilty? It doesn't, if you're a preacher, why isn't God, on your heart to get right on these things? And he told her, well, I'm justified. I just ask God to forgive me, and he has to. It says in the Bible that if you ask for forgiveness, that he will forgive you. So anything that I do, I just ask him to forgive me. He has to forgive me and forget about it. So it's like it never happened. Right? So all those terrible, evil things that I've done and will do, I just ask God for forgiveness, and it's just gone like it never happened. That was his mentality. So he's out of our lives, but he's still occasionally reaching out to, torment my mom. And then I'm in a little bit of communication with my sisters, my stepsisters, and my uncle, my father's sister's son, okay, because she moved down here with her family to Frostproof, okay, retired. And my dad was spending a lot of time with them. And he was talking to my uncle, I guess it's my cousin, not my uncle, about some stuff that he was going to do. And basically, he was online, right, talking to women in the Philippines. And so was my cousin. My cousin was talking to some woman in the Philippines as well, right? And so he was talking with my cousin about his biggest nefarious plan yet. So he was talking with this Chinese woman who was basically a sex trafficker. And she was taking girls out of China to the Philippines and then selling them into the sex trade. Okay? And my dad was talking with her, and he wanted to be part of her organization. So he was telling her, hey, listen, I can be your guy here in the United States, and I can get you more money for these girls, and I can actually get the church to pay for everything. So what he did was he went to all the local churches around where he was at, and he went in there as a missionary, right? Telling these people that he needed to raise money. He had a burden to go to the Philippines and preach to these people in the Philippines. And that there was this Christian woman, this sex trafficker. He said that this is Christian woman in China, and there's these Christian girls are being persecuted in China, and this woman is helping to get them out of China to the Philippines. But they're not safe there. There's a lot of bad people and stuff there. So I want to help get those girls, those Christian Chinese girls, from the Philippines into the United States, and then help them find families that will take them in and support them. And they bought it. They raised $30,000 for him to go to the Philippines on a sex vacation, meet up with this sex trafficker, and set up, their little organization on how everything was going to work. And he was going to take Chinese women that had been brought to the Philippines for the sex trade, and then bring them into America and find, slave owners for them in the United States, and sell these women into slavery here in the United States using church funds. And then, before he could get this plan into action, he had a massive heart attack and died. So that's enough for this video. This is run long, but there's so much to talk about how terrible he was. And this is, this isn't even all of it. This is just, enough that I could put in a video, a 45-minute video on how horrible he was and the terrible things that he's done. But that's not even all of it, okay? That's just, the stuff that I could think of off the top of my head to put in this video. So, this was my father. This was the person that abused me on a regular basis. This is, and I'm going to bring another video about, I've talked about the physical abuse, but, there was a sexual abuse against my sister. There was, and it wasn't just physical abuse. It was mental, psychological, and spiritual abuse that all of us endured. And I'm going to talk about some of the psychological and spiritual damage in the next video. But I believe this is enough for now. I think it paints a pretty good picture of what a monster he was.